Cool. All right, so it is May 23rd. This is the Kubernetes Cloud Provider Working Group. If you are attending, please add your name to the agenda. All right, so first on the list, Lucas mentioned that sometime in version 1.10, we enabled the persistent volume label admission controller, which was deprecated since 1.8. So we should probably disable that by default. I don't think there's there's not much to talk about there than that we should just do it. Anyone have the bandwidth to actually push that forward and get that disabled for 1.11? That's okay. We'll find someone else, or I'll just do it. Cool. Okay. So so on Tuesday or yesterday, I sent out an email to the to the steering committee about proposing SIG provider. So just to give everyone a quick update, there was a little bit of pushback from some of the existing SIGs. Essentially, the pushback is that they want to have it so that it's an optional opt-in to fall as a sub-project under SIG provider with the proposal going forward. So we kind of had to rework things so that ideally we want all the existing SIGs in Kubernetes to be sub-projects of SIG provider, but we're not going to make it mandatory for whatever reason the SIGs want to keep the way they organize things. We're going to leave that pretty much optional for the upcoming future. But I think the ideal scenario that we want is for all the SIGs, all the existing cloud providers to fall under one governing body. So I guess if everyone has had a chance to read the proposal and the charter, it'd be cool. Like now would be a good time to kind of raise any issues or discuss anything that came up while you're reading it.
What are the main concerns of the other SIGs, to not organize how you are proposing?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, what are the main concerns that you get? You said there were some concerns from other SIGs to not, go with the structure that we were proposing on the document. Can you?
Yeah. So the general impression that I was given, and if anyone else has anything to say about that, please speak up. But essentially, it seemed like some SIGs felt that becoming a sub-project under SIG provider was somewhat of a demotion in terms of how much power or how much say that like a certain provider has in terms of code ownership and just kind of like making governing decisions in Kubernetes in general. I'd like to think that even with sub-projects under one SIG, that wouldn't change much, but I could definitely see the concern that some people have around that.
So my perspective is, if that remain true, then we still need to go about the process of defining clear criteria by which a not currently existing but would like to become a SIG cloud provider would do so. Otherwise, we run the risk of being in exactly the same place where just by nature of when someone showed up, they have some status that someone else doesn't have. And I think we don't need to resolve that. I think that's something for the steering committee to take up as like how to organize the project as a whole and what is the granularity of SIGs. And I think that's a broader conversation. I don't think we need to decide that, but I think it is important to have to avoid the disparity across these groups just by nature of when someone showed up.
Yeah, I think
I just wanted to throw my 2 cents in there. I know that some of the feeling at AWS was that we had a lot of stuff going on, enough stuff to what people thought was enough work to be its own SIG versus I don't know that the power thing is necessarily part of it, but it's the body of work, I think.
Yeah, I think there are some aspects to running on some of these clouds, like VMware infrastructure, for example, that are outside the scope of the cloud provider, like the install and day 2 maintenance experience that the cloud provider really doesn't abstract out. So there may still be call for SIGs that relate to the user experience when running on particular platforms.
Yeah, actually, I just want to ask if there was any feedback from the steering committee about actually the consolidation process, because I think that the consolidation process is actually something we should be doing. Well, it's not up to us to decide, but I think it will be, you know, very important when it comes to consolidating the sub projects under a single overarching structure being SIG provider. Was there any feedback on that?
Yeah, there's no feedback from the steering committee yet.
So I also want to jump in a little bit from AWS. I think we're not against becoming a sub-project in the future because we want to do the right thing for the community. And if that's what is important, we will do it in the future. But I think the opinion from the tech leads in SIG AWS was right now we have so many projects in flux that we just don't think the timing is right. So let's just create the SIG separately and let it operate for a while. And if in the future we see benefits, we'll figure out the process.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I think so. With that feedback, I had a chat with Caleb, and we agreed that we're going to kind of split this effort into two parts. First part is being let's push for SIG providers so we can facilitate some way for new providers to onboard onto Kubernetes. And then the second part being to actually make this kind of project structure or governing body actually work well with existing SIGs and new SIGs, and then provide some sort of more feasible plan once we actually know how the structure is going to look. And then work closely with SIG AWS and whatever other SIGs to kind of push this forward, which may take a year, maybe 2 years. We're not really sure yet because there's a lot of complicated things with structuring sub-projects and given that SIG AWS owns more things than just things that are under AWS. So that's kind of the plan going forward right now.
And certainly there should be no disincentive for folks to get together and meet and have groups of people that work on specific parts, regardless of the SIG structure. We're not intended to replace or disincentivize other folks getting together to do the work they need to do in any way. The incentive here is simply to try to ensure consistency across these providers for end users. So that's really the goal. And I think we have clarity on that goal. It also amuses me how little of any of this part of technology comes through in any graduate program associated with the technology degree. So it always kind of makes me smile when these things come up. But reason will prevail. Thank you guys for the effort.
Okay. So yeah, whenever I get an update from the steering committee on next steps, I'll update the mailing list or the channel. But I did send out the proposal, but feel free you can still comment on the proposed charter and whatnot. Nothing is set in stone yet. Cool. So next on the list is GA milestones. So in 1.11, we are pushing the external cloud provider feature to beta, meaning that we're going to try our best not to make any breaking changes to the API or the interface for cloud providers. This is going to mean that, so if we do want to make a breaking change, we have to be very careful about what the migration is going to look like and how many versions of warning, how long we're going to give people warnings to those breaking changes. And so with that, I think ideally, I'd like to push for GA for the external cloud provider feature 2 to 3 releases from 1.11, so 1.14 or 1.15. So I don't know, I just put down some of my initial thoughts on what I think are reasonable milestones for the GA release. 2 of them being having end-to-end tests from pretty much every provider in a centralized place such as TestGrid. And the second one being having an actual foolproof story for how people can actually migrate existing clusters to use that cloud controller manager setup, which is largely pretty much what Walter's proposal is for pretty much moving code out of the repository and having better story for how we're going to build the individual components and whatnot. Anyone have thoughts on ideas on future milestones that we want for GA?
I think part of it is engine hours or time in production for beta to get some feedback and understand if the API is the right one or if there were some gaps there. So I think that 2 to 3 releases seems sufficient to capture that. But we should have some formal check-in and maybe some sort of survey or something to get some feedback. They're never perfect, but at least it's a mechanism. And then the other thing is we should be very clear and make sure to do this in Markdown as a GitHub issue and not in a doc that lives outside of that environment, just for discoverability. These kind of deprecations and especially breaking changes are always a surprise no matter how early we start communicating, but the earlier the better.
Okay, let me write that down.
Yeah, just trying to share Walter's doc. I think it was only available to, I don't know if it was to a mailing list or to a certain number of people, but we should convert that to Markdown sooner rather than later so that we can share it.
Yeah, and some of my feedback on that is it does seem more like a thought experiment than a design proposal as the tone and nature of the doc right now. So I think that's a good start, but it doesn't feel solid enough to be a real plan that people understand as a plan of record. It looks like a thought experiment at this point. So I think a couple more.
But we should still be able to share it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm just saying, I think it needs a couple more iterations before that can be perceived as a plan of record and folks would get on board. I think just the nature of the language and the idea is that we would is the kind of phrasing that's used in that doc. And I think if someone were to read that offline without the context, they wouldn't have any clarity that this is coming and I need to do something about this now.
Yeah, so that concrete Markdown page would essentially be a KEP, right, in the community repo. Okay, so how do we get the Walter's proposal there? Like, do we need more people just tackling the problem, or?
I'm gonna tag. Some of you guys have met Federico. This is Federico. He joined recently from MuleSoft. He's on the API machinery team here as well. And he's going to be working with Caleb and Walter on iterating on that doc and in the doc as it is now. But somewhere in there, I'm actually unclear as to the status of KEPs and where the winds are blowing in that world, but hopefully they can figure out if the KEP is still the right mechanism and what the granularity of the KEP is, and we'll communicate through the channels here on progress on that.
Okay.
Does that sound okay?
Yeah. So the impression I'm getting is we'll continue iterating over it on the Google Doc, and then once we kind of know what the steering committee wants in terms of official processes for new proposals, then we'll follow that.
Yeah, and there is a KEP for the cloud provider extraction already. So I don't know if this is a new KEP that refers to that one or an update to the existing KEP or what is best from the perspective of discoverability, but I've lost state on that. And so I think Caleb and Federico can help.
Okay, that makes sense. So from the impression I got from the proposal, it seems like there's pretty much multiple problems that it's trying to tackle. But I think the one that I feel like we can do right away is moving all the cloud provider code into a staging directory, because that doesn't necessarily break doesn't really break anyone's workflow because you're just changing like where the packages are being imported. But then you can kind of give everyone a loud signal that we're going to start moving things up. Obviously, we're going to get approval from everyone who owns that code to actually move it out of Kubernetes, but we can still put it in staging and tell people that that's the plan. Does anyone have objections to doing that? Pretty much it's like the first part of Walter's proposal. It's just moving everything to staging, and then from there we can figure out what to do afterwards.
No, I think that makes sense.
Okay, cool. All right, so I'll follow up with Walter, and we'll see how we can get that done. Okay, cool. I think that's it for today's meeting. Anyone have anything else they want to talk about?
So I had.
Sorry.
Sorry. I just looked up the AWS documentation on Cloud Provider, and it's really not up to date. So if it's okay with everyone, I'll just start working on it and update it.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think we talked about it, I think like 3 meetings ago or something, but essentially what we want is for every cloud provider repository to have a getting started file or something. And then we're going to work with the docs team to kind of have an automated process to scrape all the documentation and upload it to the website. Right? I think for now though, the process is to manually update the website.
Yeah, I feel like the Kubernetes.io docs needs manual update. Anything that is automatically created from the Go build and the aws.go file, that automatically goes to Kubernetes.io, but the whole structure is wrong, or at least outdated for now. So I'll just work on that and try to improve it.
Okay, sounds good.
I just wanted to remind that Walter is on vacation this week, but if there is anything urgent, or maybe just to connect and be on the same page, I'm here. So happy to try to replace the 10% of Walter.
Cool, good to know.
Point one, chef tacos. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, thanks guys.
Thank you.